Burnout is something that's much more chronic, it's much more long-term. WHO now recognises it as actually a workplace issue. Being present, being in the now, taking that little pause before we do anything can literally help our brains connect in a way that we can start to think clearly, we can remember things better, we can process information, we can be more creative because your body knows it's safe.
What are the early warning signs that high performers tend to ignore?
Trying to just resolve stress by taking medication or whatever, you're literally fighting yourself. You're literally fighting your body's natural mechanism.
Muhami Matters with Chris Adams, powered by CJA Consulting.
Hello, welcome to Mohammy Matters, where credibility meets clarity in legal and professional services. I'm your host, Chris Adams, founder of Mohammy and CJA Consulting. Today, we're going to be talking about something that almost everyone in the biased professional world recognises. High-speed work, high pressure, and the slow slide from overwhelm into burnout. My guest is Sarah Haboubi, who's named herself, has been known as the Brain Lady, an NLP trainer, performance coach who helps people understand what's happening in their nervous system and how to regain control when work and life feel like they're running you. We're going to cover the warning signs of burnout, why it happens for different reasons in corporates versus entrepreneurship, what the Moan zone is costing you, and a couple of practical tools that you can use immediately. Hi, Sarah, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
I said you've known yourself the Brain Lady, but it's a great name, I think. For those who haven't met you before, give us a bit of background on you and how you've gotten to be known as the Brain Lady.
So just the abridged version, I think, because like everyone in Dubai, we've all got very interesting backgrounds and different reasons, how we are here, why we're here, and also, how we got here, what are our backgrounds. So my original life, working life, was as an engineer. So I worked under quite high pressure in terms of in the construction industry, and I worked in London and Malaysia and Thailand. And then 24 years ago, I had a session with an NLP master coach and trainer who essentially in 20 minutes unblocked a massive problem I'd been suffering from without realizing the root cause, why. And I was absolutely blown away. So I became an NLP coach, then a master coach, and then a trainer. And I've been doing that for the last 24 years. And I am really obsessed with helping people understand their own minds, understand what's actually driving them, so that they can empower themselves. Because no one can empower anyone else. When you talk about empowerment, it's something that you do for yourself. But if you don't have the tools and the strategies, then you can be essentially banging your head against a brick wall.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have gone through that, the brick wall banging, and that we all have good days and bad days. But the conversation I've had with you in the past have really helped. Just the simple little tools that you've given. So maybe we'll explore a bit more of those before. But let's start with burnout. People say I'm burnt out. What are they usually describing? What symptoms do you see most? So
there are sort of 5 classic symptoms that are sort of linked to burnout proper, as per se. So obviously we're all going to go through stressful times. There are things sometimes that happen and we know they're for a short period, and we elevate our nervous system to be able to combat that, and eventually that's over and we kind of go back to our sort of baseline. However, burnout is something that's much more chronic. It's much more long-term. I mean, the WHO now recognises it as actually, a workplace issue. So there are sort of five things. So one is really persistent exhaustion. So doesn't matter how much sleep you get, even if you've had a holiday, and you come back, that persistent exhaustion is actually still there. So it's not resolved by, just have a rest, just have a good night's sleep. It's almost like bone deep. And I think all of us have probably been burnt out at some point. It could be for any reason. It can be even when you've had children. I mean, just before we started recording, I was talking about my younger son didn't sleep for a year and a half, and I was beyond exhausted. I think I was running at that point on about 2 hours of sleep a night. and you just can't function with that. So that was obviously, and it was very stressful, and you know, not being able to turn off essentially. The second symptom is cognitive impairment. So this is where your focus is reduced. Maybe you've noticed there's sort of memory lapses, you're not as sharp as you were, and also something called decision fatigue. So decision fatigue is real. So if you're in a really high pressure job and you have to make a lot of decisions that are really important all day long, you'll notice that by maybe lunchtime or, you know, later in the evening, you've literally got to the point where you're just like, I can't make any more decisions. I'm saturated. I just can't do that. And that goes on again. It's more chronic as opposed to just a day when it's been a busy day. The third one is called emotional detachment and that numbness. So this is where quite often people become quite cynical about their jobs. So there's a real sort of disconnect from maybe something they were really passionate about, whether it's their own company or they're in a corporate position, where they just start to feel that, you know, this really isn't for me. They're disconnecting from people at work, from the work itself. They may be procrastinating a lot more, etc. And one of the signs to notice from other people, like if you're watching your colleagues or someone who you work closely with, is that detachment from the people at work, where they're no longer socializing at work or even after work, maybe something they did before. They're just not coming out. They just seem to be really, really flat emotionally. They also often have a real sense of reduced effectiveness. So it's like the belief in themselves starts to go down. It's like, I don't think I can do this. So confidence takes a real knock in burnout. It feels like everything is an uphill struggle, that no matter what they do, it's not working. So that tends to feel as if, you know, any successes that they had previously are kind of wiped out. It's now just focusing on the here and now, and it's like, this isn't working, I can't do this, etc. And obviously that then leads to our nervous system being dysregulated. So we'll end up with sleep issues, as I spoke about, and sleep is absolutely essential. And if we don't sleep properly, we don't get our... You know, and it's not 8 hours. For some people, it's less. Some people, you know, it's a little bit more. But it's proper, good quality sleep where you're not waking up and your mind's churning over things, either the day that you've had or preparing for the next day, where you're constantly ruminating. Obviously, being irritable, a lot of anxiety, and just that feeling of overwhelm, essentially. So obviously, we've all had these feelings in some way, shape, or form, but it's a prolonged kind of chronic situation. You know, just thinking, it's like being in a black hole. I just feel like I can't get out of that.
So I guess that kind of goes to answer my next question is of what is burnout versus just being a bit tired or constantly tired?
Yeah, it's more persistent. And sort of, obviously we can have a busy day and be really tired at the end of it. But if you're able to switch off and go to sleep and have a good rest, the next day you're kind of back on it again, that's different. But if it's day after day after day, so it's like persistent drain on energy. And often people, I think people know the term burnout now. I think people kind of go, oh, I do. When people say I feel burnt out, I mean, if you think about it, it's literally like your nervous system is just kind of fried. So that term burnout, I mean, why do we even use burnout? You know, it's as if all of our nerve endings are just kind of on hyper alert and we're just running on empty, essentially. And that's definitely the phrase I would have used when my son didn't sleep. I just felt like I was on the reserve tank and I was running on fumes. Sometimes I was thinking, I don't know how I'm functioning, you know, but obviously you have to get up, you have to do what you've got to do. But it's a real sense of dread. And when you open your eyes in the morning, you're thinking, oh, I really don't want to face the day. You know, it's just that sense of dread coming over you. Oh, how awful. You know, we only have one life at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You don't want to be living, you know, waking up in the morning, day after day, feeling that sense of dread.
Absolutely. We were saying before this that being tired is like a form of torture. You know, there's a reason why they use sleep deprivation in torture.
It's brilliant. Yeah, I remember
horrible,
thinking,
isn't it?
I will sign any confession as long as I can get some sleep. I don't care what it is. I'll sign anything. Just let me sleep. It's dreadful.
Now, you were saying that there's a difference in adults and children's sleep and how it if you're overtired, how it comes out. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, obviously I discovered this with my own child when he didn't sleep. And one of the interesting things with babies and young children is when they're tired, their body actually goes into pain. They actually start to really get very stressed by it. And if you think about it, when you're stressed and you've got elevated cortisol or adrenaline, you're not designed to sleep. So it becomes a bit of a vicious cycle. Whereas for adults, and again, it's different for different people, but I know for me, I was so exhausted, I would literally fall asleep at like a stone going to the bottom of a pond. That was kind of how it felt. However, if I got woken up by anything, a little sound or whatever it was, I was in full, adrenaline mode, and then I couldn't sleep for hours afterwards. So it was this horrible cycle of could sleep but couldn't stay asleep. So often sleep problems are not just insomnia, like not being able to get to sleep. It's like you're so exhausted, you'll fall asleep quickly, but then if you do wake up in the night, it's like your brain immediately turns on. Children, we really have to catch them as they're starting to get tired and not let them fight it. It's so strange, isn't it? Why do babies and children fight sleep? Well, children especially. They're like, no, I'm going to miss something. I'm going to, FOMO. They want to stay up. They want to be out with the adults, etc. But one of the expressions in the book I read, which was called Healthy Sleep Habits, Happy Child. So if anyone's got babies who don't sleep, this is the book for you. Was, helping children learn how to go to sleep on their own is one of the greatest gifts you could ever give them. And it was life-changing for me, I have to say. But having experienced that very chronic lack of sleep, I do know my cognitive function was down, my memory was impaired, obviously immensely irritable, really no capacity for dealing with anything that was out of the ordinary. As long as I knew what was happening, I was okay. But if anything came at me that was like an additional cognitive load, forget it.
Yeah, what you've just said about, I said, try and telling that to a mother with a newborn. They need to go to sleep on their own. It's easier said than done, isn't it?
No. So I'm not a baby expert. I'm not a sleep expert for babies. However, you do have to find your baby's rhythm and you have to kind of work with that. So, But it is really important to be able to get sleep in as much as possible. So, I feel any new mums out there, I feel you.
I do too. New mums and new dads. I remember the one time I think I literally in my whole career of driving nearly fell asleep at the wheel was just with the newborn basically, and coming home from work one evening and just being so exhausted. I was like, I could actually... I'm struggling to stay awake.
A little micro sleep. If I just close my eyes for a second, a little micro sleep. Yeah, but babies and children don't do that. They actually get more and more wound up. So catching them as they're starting to get tired and kind of helping them unwind is really powerful. And it's like, it is different.
So a few different terms are thrown around: overwhelm, soft burnout, and full burnout. How do you sort of define those? What's the difference?
So again, I suppose it depends if it's chronic. So overwhelm, if it's chronic overwhelm, you're literally feeling like the cognitive load in your brain it's bigger than your capability and your capacity. So that's going to stress anybody out. They're going to feel that, again, the confidence is going to be knocked. In terms of soft burnout and full burnout, so soft burnout is a little bit like death by 1,000 cuts. It's very slow. It kind of creeps up on you. You feel as if you're managing, but actually really underneath it all, you're actually getting into, again, that dysregulation of your nervous system. You're starting to slip into full burnout. Full burnout is where, when it's acute, the person literally just has been stopped in their tracks. So
Really?
That's when you have, there is something called executive burnout, where they literally end up in hospital. You might have even something, quite common is actually a heart attack, heart issues. Right. Stress is a killer, as they say. So when you've got that much stress on your body, it can cause all kinds of physiological problems that literally, it's like your body just says, okay, you're not listening. I'm going to have to take you out. I'm going to do something to completely stop you in your tracks because you're not paying attention to what's physically going on. And it will turn up the volume, whereas soft burnout is much more insidious. It's much more kind of like, no, I'm coping, not really coping to the best of your ability, but it starts to creep in. So I think death by 1,000 cuts is probably the best expression for soft burnout.
So I guess what you ideally want is for soft burnout not to turn into the full burnout where you end up, not being able to get out of bed or in hospital or something.
Exactly.
What are the early warning signs that high performers tend to ignore? And maybe, we just think, we should just be coping better. It's fine. We'll be fine.
I guess everyone is different. And I think this is why, my nickname, the Brain Lady, it wasn't me actually. I didn't name myself. Someone else called me that. And I was like, okay, that kind of really actually fits. Is that we've all got different coping mechanisms. We've all got different nervous systems. We have a different idea of how we're supposed to be at work, what our communication skills are like, what our where is our resilience at. So it's not a case of like this is exactly what happens to everybody. Each person is going to have to tune into themselves and really ask themselves, are they where they'd like to be, where they are right now? Is this something that they feel like, yeah, it's going to be short term, I can get through this? So it could be, for example, changing a job. I mean, that's very stressful. Can be very overwhelming. And there's a massive learning curve when you start in a new job and everything else. But you kind of expect that and you think, yeah, I'm going to get through that. But if it's just been, for too long, and I think everyone's got to make that decision for themselves. It's like, okay, do you know what? I've really got to this point now where I think the big key is when they have a good night's sleep or they go on holiday, it's still there.
The inability to sleep, you mean? The constant fatigue.
Or just that feeling, or to go on holiday, they sleep, and then they get sick. A lot of people do that. They go on holiday, and within 24 hours, they're ill. And it's like your nervous system has been on fighting, it's been fighting. Imagine all your sentries are all on guard, and they're all kind of protecting you. And as soon as you go on holiday, they go, oh, we can relax now. And then they relax, and it's like whatever they've been holding at bay, just comes in. And often people who are burnt out will get ill within about 24, 48 hours of being on holiday. It's like the whole system just goes, okay, now I can relax, and I can deal with my health. I think also in terms of that being cynical around the job and that kind of confidence part as well. Are you feeling that, oh, this isn't for me anymore? Why did I choose this job? This is not the right path. I've made all these wrong decisions. Just watch the self-talk. What are you saying to yourself around your job and what you're doing?
What if your job is your own company? Because I think a lot of people listen to this are founders or maybe partners in law firms and accountancy firms and high-powered jobs.
So I literally wanted to find that, because I sort of know when I talk to people, but I wanted to get it kind of a bit more set, is what's the difference between a corporate, if you're in a corporate job and burnout, and even different levels in corporate versus entrepreneurs, if you're a man, if you're a woman, etc. And I think this is really key. So as you said, a lot of entrepreneurs and founders will be listening. One is that the identity and the person's business become fused. It's very hard to separate your company, the organization that you've set up, and you. It becomes very much, it's not about just work, it's now your reputation, it's your identity, and it's very much tied in with self-worth. So it's like, if I'm not doing well, then, business-wise, then I'm not doing well personal-wise as well. It's like it really has that tie-in. And I'm an entrepreneur and a business owner myself, so I totally know this one, which is there is no off switch.
No, there's not, is there?
There's no off switch. The day blurs into one, the weeks blur into one another. There's no very clear boundary, and obviously it's something that you can do. You can set that boundary. It doesn't have to be like this. And I do know people who function extremely well and have a very set boundary. I mean, it was quite interesting. Someone contacted me this morning, wanted to meet up for networking at the weekend. And immediately I went, no, my weekends are sacred. And being able to say no is really important. And I think it's one of the things a lot of people struggle with. Actually being able to say no to business, no to a meeting, no to, networking. It can be anything. If you feel like, oh, no, this is really going to help my business and I've got to do it because my business is me, again, you can be burning out because you're going to too many things and spreading yourself way too thin. Obviously, unpredictable income. If you're running a business and you don't have a pipeline that's been set up where you know what's coming in, obviously you're stressing around that. That's very normal, I would say. And again, decision fatigue. I mean, if you're the one who's making all of the decisions for everything, and I know I've experienced this as well, where, even something as simple as creating an image for a slide, and you're looking at thinking, well, I don't know, is this? And if I get to that point, I think, okay, I've reached that saturation point, walk away, go and do something else, have a bit of downtime, come back, and also recognize how important is it. Because, if you're a bit of a perfectionist, that's really the enemy as well, because you can get a bit paralyzed. So all those decisions are like, I have to know if this decision is going to lead me in the right way. And the reality with any decision is we never know the consequence of that decision until we're in it.
Yeah.
So all decisions are made on incomplete information. And being able to deal with quite a lot of gaps is really important, not having to have that perfection and, being paralyzed essentially. And also isolation. It can be very lonely when you're running your own business. And if you're a natural extrovert, then being on your own actually becomes very exhausting because your battery is recharged by other people. And even introverts whose batteries are recharged by being on their own, after a while, it's like, well, I still need to go external. I need to have that input into my life to actually lift me up and feel like I'm not on my own here. So I think that kind of isolation and a bit of loneliness can really add into that too. So those are the 5 main ones for entrepreneurs. That's kind of why they end up in burnout.
Yeah, I'm probably a bit of an introvert, and I have to force myself to go out to some of these network events, or even jump online sometimes to the network events. It's like, deep breath, here we go. But it's empowering. It gives you energy. It gives you inspiration, and often you walk away from that feeling a lot better than what you did before you went, because you do take your mind off your own business, and you do take your mind off, the ins and outs. You're talking to other people and hearing what their opinions are, I guess, and how they are either experiencing the same thing as you, or they're just inspiring you. So
100%. And we're all built for connections.
Yes.
So I think the difference between extroverts and of course it's a continuum. You're not one or the other. You're somewhere on that. And I've definitely found as I've got older, I'm leaning much more towards the introvert side of extrovert, if that makes sense, much more in the middle. I think it's about the quality of the conversations, and it's the quality of the meeting. Rather than just being, it's like, you and I have been to lots of different networking events, and some of them are overwhelming. It's just like throwing business cards at each other. There's no real deep connection with those people. I much prefer, which is very different from when I was younger, smaller, much more kind of concentrated groups, and much more sort of, how do you have that quality conversation? And that's uplifting. I think when you're around lots of people, it's a little bit difficult then to kind of really know, where do I fit and how do I fit with this? Is there a connection? And then you're having to work really hard afterwards. I think with sort of more intimate and good quality connections, you're very comfortable. Like you and I, we've met for a coffee, and it was like, we sat down as if we'd known each other for ages because we'd had that good quality connection beforehand.
Yeah, all the pleasantries are, you don't need to worry about. And the pleasantries from the point of view of, not knowing who each other is, and all that sort of stuff. So tell us a bit of, do you have any stories, any examples of people you've experienced, or people you've worked with, who have experienced burnout, and how you've been able to help them?
So I've got quite a few. I think probably the most recent one was a lady who's an equine vet. And in Dubai, obviously, horse racing is enormous, and it's very, I didn't realize actually the level of pressure that vets are under here. And it's quite scary. I think it's not just here, but worldwide. Equine vets in particular have the highest rate of suicide, which is quite shocking. And it's to do with the level of stress. And again, it's chronic. It goes on and on and on. If you've got a racing season, it's going to go on for weeks, months, sometimes, especially if they're moving around. And think about, the cost of the animals. Like, how much are they worth? So you've got owners, you've got maybe your boss, which could be the hospital, or it could be a clinic, whatever it is. And people go into veterinary work because they love animals. And apparently there's a very high rate of healthy animals being put down because they've kind of outlived their usefulness, because it's a business.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Horrible. So really stressful, and pressure from everywhere. So one of those jobs where, they could be on call. So it can be any time of day. They can get a phone call. They have to then go to the stables, etc. So their sleep can be broken. So this lady, amazing lady actually, very highly qualified, huge amounts of experience, and she kept saying, I should be able to cope with this because of my years of experience, my qualifications, and I'm really good at my job, etc. But she just said she actually said to me, every racing season she burns out and then she crashes afterwards. She ends up being ill, she ends up, just being completely flat, no energy, and then she has to build it all back up again. On top of that, she had, at the time I met her, her 4 children were all at school.
4 children, goodness.
4 children. I've got 2 and I always feel like I've got 20.
Yeah.
So 4 children, all at school, all at different stages, of their school career. And she just felt like when she got home, she had absolutely nothing left to give to the kids. And of course, they haven't seen her all day. They want a bit of mum. And she just said she was just very irritable. And the biggest issue for her was sleep. So she would get to bed and maybe she'd fall asleep, but as soon as she'd wake up, she'd start going over the day, how it had played out, and rerunning things in her mind and how it should have happened and what she should have done and what she should have said. Or she was worried about the next day and she was thinking, God, I've got to do this, 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 and this. So she wasn't present in her life very much. It was all the past or the future. So we did some work. One of the interesting things was actually about her own perception of herself at work, how she felt other people were perceiving her, and how she always felt she had to prove herself. My background, as I said, is engineering, so I know what that feels like when you're in a world where maybe you're the outlier. So as a woman, I was very much, and apparently it's the same with equine vets. Women are still the minority. So she felt she was always having to prove herself. So anything that was indicating that she was being questioned or her decisions were being challenged, she would get annoyed. So, and think about when you're really angry and when you're really annoyed, the drain on your energy that happens as a result of that. So not only was she ruminating, she was overreacting to things, and she was racing around, and also perfectionism, trying to do absolutely everything constantly at the top of her ability, when she could still do it. She could still do the job very, very well without this pressure of like absolute perfection. And any decision she made, she was constantly questioning herself as well. She was like, was that the right dose? Was that, and she'd just worry about absolutely everything.
The consequences, I guess, the wrong dose are, large.
Yeah, huge. So I kept saying, okay, but worrying about it after the event is not very useful. If you're more present and you're calm and you're thinking clearer, then you're less likely to make mistakes anyway. So it's not important. It's when you're doing something, so I teach a lot of people how to get really present into their bodies. And this is so important. And it's something that I discovered when I was doing my master's research. And it was such a light bulb moment for me that I remember thinking, everyone needs to know this, especially those in education, because it's the stress versus learning. And when we're stressed, the part of the brain that is responsible for our stress response obviously triggers off that whole cascade of, heart beating faster, stomach, in tension, sweaty palms, all that kind, all of that is designed to help us save our lives if we're in a genuinely dangerous situation.
Fight or flight, that sort of thing.
Fight or flight. So if your body thinks you're in danger, it's going to do what it's designed to do to save you. That's its number one job, keep you alive. So if we're worrying about something, the body doesn't know the difference. Is it real? Is it happening right now? Is it a past event? Is it a future event that we're imagining? It has no idea. So it just thinks, okay, well, I need to be producing adrenaline. I need to be producing cortisol. Only doing what it's programmed to do, what we're designed to do. Trying to just resolve stress by taking medication or whatever.
Caffeine.
You're literally fighting yourself. You're literally fighting your body's natural mechanism. So what we need to do is we need to look at how can we be as present as possible throughout the day. And it sounds ridiculously simple, and it is ridiculously simple, but it's also incredibly powerful. So being present, being in the now, taking that little pause before we do anything can literally help our brains connect in a way that we can start to think clearly, we can remember things better, we can process information, we can be more creative, because your body knows it's safe. And we're very lucky. We live somewhere that is inherently safe. What are we like? We're not really, apart from driving. But
Yes.
you should have your adrenaline elevated when you're driving. But other than that, we're not under attack. We don't have bombs falling from the sky. We don't have wild animals. We don't have tribes trying to kill us. So our instincts, need to be harnessed. and actually only allowed to kind of get into that level of stress and fear if we're genuinely in a situation that requires that. So just taking a big deep breath, something very simple called balanced breathing, where you breathe in for 5 and you breathe out for 5, and you just do that for a few rounds. You don't hold your breath. I mean, there's lots of different breathing patterns. This one's the easiest because it's just in and out. And what you find is just by regulating your breathing, focusing on your breathing, within 1 minute, you can feel your whole nervous system calming down. And I teach this to children. 5-year-olds love it. So I know if it works with kids, it'll work with adults. And it's something that you think, well, we're breathing every day. Surely we should be able to just do this. But we're unconscious about our breathing. We're not aware of it. So one of the ways to sort of start paying attention to your breathing is to notice. Just notice when you're stressed, what happens to your breathing. And there's a couple of things that can happen. One is it obviously gets faster and it gets higher. And basically speaking, most of us only use about 1/3 of our lungs because we're breathing too shallow. And the other one is we might hold our breath when we're thinking and we actually brace for impact. We kind of hold our breath and the body's going, oh, I'm dying.
Yeah.
actually turns up the stress level to get you to breathe. So breathing it's dead simple, but it's very, very powerful. I mean, there are lots of other little techniques that I teach people, but that's my favorite one because, well, you're breathing anyway. You might as well do it, as a balanced breath.
So with the vet that you worked with, is that the technique that you used and that's what helped her?
So I taught her how to get grounded, how to get present. That was number one. We also started to look at her beliefs about herself. So beliefs are interesting because it's not that they're actually 100% true, but if you believe something about yourself or the world, then you will always look for evidence that it's true.
Yeah, okay. We need to capture that one.
Yeah. So she believed that she had to always prove herself. That was actually a belief that she had. So anytime anyone questioned anything or whatever it was, she immediately went, oh, see, they don't believe in me. They think I can't do this job. So what we did was we basically reframed it. She was able to really identify with her experience and her qualifications and how good she was, really, lock into that. And also to see things from other people's point of view. So being able to actually step outside yourself and go, well, if I was the client and I was looking at you, how would I feel? What would I be seeing in terms of communication? If I was another vet, and we were talking, and I was looking at myself and how I was speaking and how I looked, what impact would it have on me? And if I was, and you take different positions on a situation, and it's amazing how it expands your understanding of the situation and gives you a lot more information than just from your point of view. Because one of the things, unfortunately, that we're all addicted to is being right.
Yeah. I would say it makes you feel better, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's like, well, see, I'm right. Even if what you're right about is negative. It's like, yes. see, people don't trust me. Oh, I knew that. I knew they wouldn't do that. And it's like that hit of dopamine in terms of sort of proving yourself right. And just sort of quickly, which is the difference between dopamine and serotonin. So I heard a really good explanation of these two, the difference between the two. Dopamine is like, I need more, I need more, I need more. So that's why addiction to screens, scrolling, doom scrolling, really not good for any of us. It's actually changing our brain wiring. And also our concentration spans are getting shorter and shorter because we're being exposed to these very short clips. And it sort of trains the brain that that's all you need to get a dopamine hit. Serotonin is, I've had enough. It's a very different chemical in the body. It's actually it's the happiness chemical, supposedly.
So it's like satisfaction.
Satisfaction. You're like, no, I'm okay. I've had enough. And interestingly, 80% of our serotonin is produced in the gut.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you're not eating right, if you're not sleeping right, and if you're very stressed, so our natural survival mechanism is if we go into stress mode, we will shut down two things mainly: our prefrontal cortex, so our thinking brain, and our digestive system.
Is that the body protecting itself?
Well, if think about the body, it's only got a certain amount of energy, and if we have to run away, fight or flight, we want to have more energy in our lungs, in our blood vessels, in our arms and legs, so we can fight or we can run away. So it has to take it from somewhere else. It has to redistribute it. Whereas if you bring yourself to balance, you should really have the right energy that everywhere needs, in your body. So, and it's going to change. It's fluid throughout the day, but you want to keep coming back to this balance zone. So she used that. She found that really incredible. It also, and I said, you're working with horses. Horses are going to tell you straight away if you're stressed or not. They're like a biofeedback system. They're going to pick it up. And her belief in herself. We looked at different, perceptions on her kind of events that had happened. And also sort of, why she was doing the job in the first place. And I think that had got lost in the process. So she was able to come back for her love of horses, and they were the priority. She was like, if I put the horses as number one, she said, everything else is kind of secondary. So that was really good for her as well. And she just ended up, her sleep improved. She stopped having to take sleeping tablets, which was massive. So she could function the next day. She didn't have to drink as much coffee. And I mean, she actually attended my full training, so she got a lot on that full training. It wasn't just a one-to-one package. But she came back after a few weeks, and when she walked in, I was like, oh my goodness, where's the rest of you gone? And she'd lost about 6 kilos. And I said, what did you do? She said, I didn't realize how much of a stress eater I was. So she said, I was eating constantly because I was stressed. And that's because when we eat, we actually release endorphins. So it's a natural, it feels good, so we call it comfort eating for a reason, because it makes us feel good. Also, you can eat your feelings. I don't know if you've ever heard that expression.
I have, but yes.
You eat your feelings. So as your feelings come up and you don't want to deal with them, or you can't deal with them, you'll eat something because it just kind of pushes it down temporarily. So she just said she didn't realize how much more she was eating every day because of her stress. And she said it was not a conscious decision to eat less. She just said she just didn't need it. And what was interesting was that actually over the course of the training, things were getting worse at work. So things were actually getting more stressful, and she was becoming calmer. And
That's very interesting.
Everyone kept saying to her, how are you dealing with this without losing your mind? And she just was like, me being stressed is not going to change the situation. Me worrying about it, me getting angry about it, taking it home, talking to everybody, being in the moan zone, which that constant, this is what's wrong, this is what's wrong. She said she stayed away from the moaning, and she just said, just focus on her job, just being present as much as she can. She said, things would irritate her because, we're human, but at the same time, she wasn't holding on to them. She had techniques for just going, okay, is it important for me to hold on to this? Is it important for me to keep thinking about it? And she realized most of it was just, ruminating. There were just things that were going round and round in circles. It wasn't really helping her.
Yeah, I definitely know the feeling of waking up in the middle of the night and your brain just starts going. Even if you don't feel stressed, if your brain starts going, it's very, very hard to then stop it and get back to sleep. So I have so many questions out of everything you've just said, Sarah, but I think it's probably worth taking a step back and just quickly recapping the techniques you just used with the vet. So it was, you'll have to recap it for me, I think, but it was essentially breathing.
So what the balanced breathing actually does is it calibrates your autonomic nervous system. So there's lots of ways that you can do that. Balanced breathing, box breathing, any kind of breathing exercise where you're really focused on your breathing in order to calm your body is great. So anything, and there are other ways of calming your autonomic nervous system down, but that's the easiest one to talk about here. Then it was also looking at her beliefs. So did she have positive or negative beliefs about herself or about the industry that she was in? Looking at things from a different perspective. So whenever she had some pretty serious kind of incidents that had happened at work where, massive clashes. And when she was able to go back to that and review it from different angles, she realized it wasn't what she thought it was from just her point of view. So being able to see things from multiple points of view makes people really amazing communicators, actually.
Yeah.
Because we're not just going, I'm right, you're wrong. My job is to convince you you're wrong. Like that will never work, because if you're in for a win-lose, situation, everyone loses, really. So Stephen Covey, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, it's all about, one of the habits is about a win-win attitude.
Yeah.
How can we meet in the middle? How can we, and you have to admit sometimes you're wrong, or that your point of view is not 100% accurate, and being able to give that up can really be a lot of relief.
And I guess learn from that as well. Learn,
100%.
I was wrong. This is why I was wrong. Yeah, it's probably quite important.
Being able to, because, as I said, we're all addicted to being right.
Yeah.
And then just that whole thing of the breathing really helped with her sleep, but just asking herself, is it important right now to think about this thing? Is me worrying about it going to help it? Is it going to solve the problem? And one of the things I've done in my own life that's been really helpful is, if you're stuck with a decision, if you're not sure, sorry, I've got a very itchy nose. If you're struggling with making a decision and you keep going over and over and over and you just cannot make a decision, then the reality is you don't have enough information yet to make the decision.
Okay, that's an interesting point.
Because if you did, you would have made it. If you had all of the information that you need, because we've all made decisions, and sometimes we've been struggling, and then maybe we talk to somebody and they just give us a different perspective. We're like, I never thought of that. And then suddenly we're like, okay, I know what I'm going to do.
Yeah, that's quite counterintuitive, because usually we think when we're indecisive, it's because we're thinking too much. We're overthinking it rather than just making a decision. So the pressure is to go the other way and just say, okay, let's just do it one way or another, and then not regret it. But you're saying find more information, spend a bit more time.
Just first of all, recognize that you are not in a position to make a decision. Take that pressure off yourself. Don't just say, I'm not in a position right now to make a decision, so I'm going to relax on that, and I'm going to maybe look at someone else who's done this and ask them, what do they do? Or maybe it's the wrong time. Maybe it's the right thing to do, but timing is not great. So I'm just sort of stuck at the moment because I can't make this decision yet. And being able to just park something and go, right, I know it's there, but I'm not going to focus on it all the time, can really alleviate a lot of pressure. And if we are under pressure to make a decision and we don't know it, then obviously make a decision and go with it. But we will never know the consequence of a decision until after the event.
Until you make it. So the techniques that you just spoke about are called NLP. So we probably should have covered this at the beginning, but we'll take a step back then and just use it in that context. So tell us a bit about NLP, what it is and how it works.
It's a horrible name. I hate the name. I think it doesn't really say, it kind of says what it does, but it's in a very sort of computer kind of orientated way. So it stands for neuro-linguistic programming.
Yes.
Essentially, if you take those 3 words, what does that mean? It means it's your nervous system. So how is your nervous system experiencing the world through your senses and internally? Linguistic is about language, but also non-verbal communication. And the linguistic aspect is obviously underlies everything. So with our language, how are we experiencing the world? And most of us think that with our language, we're describing the world, but actually with our language, we are determining the world. So how we talk about something determines our experience, not the thing itself. So in NLP, there's a lot of what are called presuppositions, things that we adopt as being true. And one is that the map is not the territory. So if you're looking at a map of Dubai, it's not Dubai, it's just a map of it. And that's the same in our brains. We have a map of reality. It's just a map. It's not actually reality. It's our version of it. And so our language and our nervous system together obviously play a big role in terms of our experiences. And then you have programming, which is to do with essentially how we do have programs that run inside of us. We've got, and they come about from 3 different roots. One is instinct. So we've all got things that drive us. So for example, apparently the only 2 things we're actually born afraid of is falling and loud noises.
Okay.
Everything else we learn.
Right.
So that's why when you make a loud noise and the baby wakes up, they start crying.
Yeah, and they're not afraid of falling over, are they?
Well, if they fall, It's not like, they do, it's a bit of a shock. So those are the two things we're born with. Then we learn through modelling. So we observe our parents and the people around us. And as we go up, obviously then it's our peers and our teachers and society. And then, of course, we've got the phone. That's not great in terms of modelling behaviour. And then we have our own experiences. And anything that we experience prior to the age of 7 will essentially determine how we are as adults. Which is a bit scary, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a bit late for many of our kids.
So if you think about, imagine, you're at school and you're asked to read out loud and you fumble over a word and the class laugh. Everyone in the class laughs. Or the teacher tells you off, or there's something negative happens as a result of that, rather than being encouraged and it's fine and just carry on. Often people then develop a fear of public speaking. Because it was something, but it happened prior to the prefrontal cortex being fully developed. So it's a very much and it's called the imprint era. So we're like pieces of wet clay, and any of these experiences leave a mark on us unless we do something, differently with them. But they can genuinely influence, how we are as adults and how we cope as adults. So a lot of what I do is not about going over the past for the sake of it. We actually look at the present and what are we carrying that belongs in the past. Are we carrying outdated beliefs? Are we carrying emotional baggage that belongs in the past? I'll give a fairly universal example. And I'm going to be a bit stereotyped here, but little kid, 5, he's at home and he's finger painting. There's bright yellow paint and it's everywhere and he's covered and the kitchen table's covered. He's having a great time. And Dad comes in and Dad's had a really bad day. And Dad's wearing his best suit because he was going to be called into the management for a meeting. And then on the way home, it was raining, and then he got a flat tire, and he was stuck for an hour waiting for the roadside assist to come and help him. And he's had one of the worst days of his life. And he comes in, and little 5-year-old, we'll call him Johnny, why not? Little Johnny comes running up, Daddy, 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 bright yellow paint in his hands. What's the dad going to do? Dad's going to push him away. He's not in for it. Johnny doesn't go, oh, you know what, Dad's had a really bad day. I'm going to give him half an hour to calm down. Johnny's going to go, Daddy doesn't love me. Or something can just come. We don't know what children think, really, at the end of the day. They have what's called private logic. So they will make sense of things in a particular way that then becomes embedded. And from there, everything can start to build up. So what I do, and people like me, is to find maybe a belief, an event, something. It's not the event. It's not like, oh, wasn't your dad awful? But it's never about blame. It's never about, who needs to be punished for this thing that happens. It's just said, okay, let's look at this from objectively. Let's look at this from a distance. Let's ask the question, what really happened? And do you still need to carry this emotion, or can you change it? So you don't want your 7-year-old, your 5-year-old self running the show now.
No.
That's not good. So I've helped lots of people who have had, we all have stuff happen to us. Life happens. So it's not about what happens, it's what do we end up believing about ourselves and the world as a result of that. And that is incredible how, we've all seen it. I've done it myself, where you see adults behaving in a way you're thinking, God, they're like children. They're behaving like children. And it's like, yeah, they're behaving from their inner child.
Huh.
That's actually what's happening. So we need to go and we need to resolve that open loop, essentially. It's something that has been stuck inside there, couldn't make sense of it, too young, not enough experience, not enough information. And we go back as adults and we basically resolve this. And once you see the solution, that problem is gone. You don't need to talk about it forever and a day.
So, okay, recognising the problem, recognising what's happened much earlier in life, dealing with that then sets you on track for being a more positive, or releasing, I guess, some of these preconceptions.
Yeah, allowing yourself to grow. Because when we're operating from our inner child, we're going to stay young and stay stuck.
Very interesting. And does this end up relating to burnout as well? I'm just thinking about myself, but I'm thinking about other founders I know, other business owners, people who are responsible for teams. Yeah. They tend to be burnt out. They tend to be quite stressed. I'm thinking, you were talking about the breathing techniques before. I was going to say those breathing techniques have never worked for me, but probably I don't like to use those, because if I breathe and start to calm down, then I don't have enough. I get too sleepy. I don't have enough to keep going for the day. I don't have enough to do what I need to do next. So there's that drive, right?
Yeah.
So then you pop the caffeine and all that sort of stuff. So how do you deal with that?
So that's very interesting, and it's very common, which is when people start to do control their autonomic nervous system and come down to balance, you may initially feel very sleepy. So I often see yawning, and you can just see, and the way I describe it, it's like carrying heavy bags. So imagine you're carrying really heavy shopping bags and you have to get up a hill and you can't stop. You have to keep going, because if you stop, you're not going to get going again. So you just keep going, going, and then you have to climb up a few, can't think of the word now, sets of stairs.
More steps, yeah.
Yeah, to basically get to your apartment, because the lifts are broken, and then eventually you get up, and what happens when you put the bags down?
Relief.
And then you'll flop on the couch, and you'll feel your nervous system and your body coming down from this level. So if you do these techniques and you start to feel sleepy, it's not because you're going to fall asleep, it's because you've actually been at a high level of stress. So the more you do this and the more you operate from a very present, grounded state, it becomes your natural state. It becomes much more, becomes a good habit, essentially, to get into it. And you'll notice when you're out of it, you'll notice that you've got a physical location in your body that's tense. You've got your breathing. You might feel a bit wobbly. You'll start to notice some of these symptoms earlier, and you'll stop and you'll go and you'll take a few minutes and just ground yourself, just come back, give yourself a chance. So I have a story of a CFO who was very stressed, and so there is a difference between men and women in terms of burnout, and he had twins. So she would do a full day of work, come home, and then she would be mum. So she had 2 full-time jobs, essentially, which is what a lot of women are like, and some dads, of course, as well. But generally speaking, it's the women who have to carry the emotional burden of the family and the kids and decisions around the children. And so she would be up till God knows what time, getting their school uniforms done, obviously spending time with them, and then doing all the rest of the things that needed to be done. So she came to me, and all I taught her was just the grounding, breathing techniques, and also how to stay in her own. I do a lot of boundary work as well. So I help people to understand that if you don't know where your boundary is, then no one else is going to know where it is either. So we all unconsciously push up against each other in terms of our boundaries. We all try to see, well, how far can I go before I meet resistance? And she was constantly, she said she didn't have 5 minutes to herself at work because it was like an open door policy and, all of this kind of stuff. And so all we did was just some grounding. She also sort of recognized she needed a boundary. We helped her, I helped her establish her boundary. And she came back 2 weeks later and she said, every time I do this little technique, it's like the beginning of the day again. She said, it's literally like a reset.
In a good way, I hope.
In a good way. So it was like a little. So if you think about, if we just don't do anything as the day goes on, we get more and more and more and more stressed, and then we get to the point where we're exhausted. She was doing this throughout the day. She would go and she started closing her door, and she said once she realized, no, I need this space and I need this time, people started respecting that as well. So if you respect your own boundary, other people will do the same. If you don't, other people will encroach your boundary and will just, oh, no, I just need 1 minute. And she just said it was amazing. It was 2 very simple techniques. And the power of it was that she had energy left at the end of the day for her young children.
That's great, because that's what you want. That's what you want. You want to be able to, the kids are only that age once, and then once they become teenagers, they probably don't want you, but they still need you. So you have to be present. You have to be around. And I guess, you have to model well for them as well. If they're getting imprinted with your bad habits, then or what you're imposing on them, I suppose, then that's not ideal either, because that's going to affect them as they get older.
100%. So people who are burnt out at work or often get burnt out, one of the questions would be, how did your parents deal with stress? Did you have a parent who was an overworker? Constantly doing more and more and more, not having downtime. I lived in Ireland for 20 years. My husband's Irish. And the Irish are very, industrious. I shall use that term.
Okay.
Obviously, a lot of them come from very big families. You are not allowed to just sit and do nothing.
Okay.
So this idea of sitting down and actually unwinding is like a no-no. Oh no, I need to be doing something. I can't sit and do nothing and just let my nervous system relax. So that could be cultural in terms of, where you come from, or again, from your parents. What were they like? Or it could be the opposite, that you sort of went, well, I never want to be like my parents. I want to be a success, and I'm going to kind of, do a lot more. And then we're still influenced by our parents, no matter what they're like. So it's looking at where did that influence come, and does it work for you?
Yeah, it's making me reflect on my own influence of my own parents. I think I remember, being a teenager or even at university, and my dad just had me saying, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm just relaxing." He's like, "Oh, relaxing again."
Yeah, how dare you?
And now I can't. Now I struggle to relax. I just want to keep going and going and going. Like the shopping analogy you use, because for me, and I probably use a lot for a lot of people who lead their own businesses who are senior, have responsibilities, is you can't stop, because once you stop, you can't start again. So once you put those shopping bags down, then it's very difficult to get off that couch and then put the shopping away. So it's like, just one more thing. Yeah, let's put that shopping away, and then we can relax. Oh no, we can't do that, because otherwise I've got to check those emails, and then I can relax. Always one more thing.
So it's looking at the cost of that. What is that costing you? And you have to look at things like your health, your relationships, your children, your hobbies and sports, things that make, I said at the beginning, we only have one life, so everything from our first breath to our last breath, that's, what we do in between those two is what makes our life, meaningful. And if we're not sort of having that balance, and I don't believe in a work-life balance, because it's just life. Work is part of life. It's not a separate thing. And if you think about it, especially as entrepreneurs or founders, your work takes up way more than most people. It's about when you're doing something, can you be completely present? Yeah. So when you're working, be present. You're needed. Yeah, you've got some important decisions. You've got people relying on you. You've got customers who are waiting. And then when you're having your downtime, be present in your downtime. Be present with your kids. Be present with your spouse. Be present in your paddle match. Whatever it is, just be present. And it sounds, again, so simple and so ridiculous. Like, no, how can that be so... that's never going to work. It's got to be... We're more complicated than that. It's like, no. It's really, really important. The only thing that really exists is this present moment right here, right now.
So that's very difficult, isn't it? Because we're in this modern world with phones, with computers, with people, with
distraction all over
hyper stimulated, right? There's so many stimuli. It's very, very difficult to stay present, to stay grounded. So I can see how these techniques will work. So what are these grounding techniques? Give us an example.
So the breathing is one of them. The other one, so grounding, for me, I would sort of call it like an awake meditation. Okay. So you're not in a Zen mode where you're so relaxed you'll fall asleep. It's not a guided meditation where you're so detached from the outside world that you're not aware of what's happening. It's actually more about how do you get into that balance between, you can go in and think clearly, but you'll know what's going on. So you've got that kind of interplay between the internal and external world. So grounding is where you have your feet flat on the floor and you just take a big deep breath, and then you imagine you have, roots like a tree growing from the soles of your feet, and you literally imagine yourself being connected into the earth. So you really come into your body. Again, there's lots of different techniques for this. So you can do techniques where you start at the top of your head and you start to really feel, your head and your forehead and the back of your head and then your face, and you start to work your whole way down to your feet, or vice versa. There's a mindfulness method which is called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it's 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And again, you can only do those things in the present moment. So anything that involves you just switching off for just literally a minute or 2 minutes, it's not a big... I'm not great at meditation. I like meditations, but I always go, I'm too busy. Yeah. Whereas this is, everyone's got 2 minutes. Everyone has 2 minutes. And the impact of this, I've been doing this for a long, long time, is quite remarkable across the board. So I work with learning difficulties, for example. And I've found that the students I've worked with who struggle to learn, when they're grounded, their symptoms lessen because stress makes them worse. So let's go the opposite. Parents, being grounded makes it a lot easier to deal with the trials and tribulations of bringing up children. When you're at work, in relationships, even sports people, whether it's golf, whether it's football, rugby, horse riding, it really doesn't matter. When you teach grounding to people and being present, it has a huge impact in terms of their outcomes, not just their nervous system, but actually what they achieve. And I've seen people go up, levels in terms of whether it's golfing, their score comes down in terms of their scratch, going down to scratch, whether it's footballers. I work with some teams who actually went up a division as a result of being present, so they're not overthinking things. Think about it. Our brain is the engine of our lives, and if you're not using it in a way that's constructive, it's going to be destructive.
Very, very true. I was thinking of an archer in the Olympics, for example. They have to just steady themselves, don't they, and focus, I guess.
Yep.
They must ground themselves.
So I was just thinking about the Turkish Olympic shooter who just came on. Everyone else is in these outfits, and he was just there, very casual. He had his hand in his pocket and just, and he won.
Yeah.
He was so relaxed. He was chilled. No pressure.
Steady hands. That is the key. You're hoping that surgeons and stuff can use these kind of techniques with a nice steady hand, nice and calm.
So focused and so present. Like, you can't be somewhere else. You have to be focused on what you're doing. So a lot of people, we know that feeling of, I call it flow state. But this is how to get into it.
Yes.
So we'll know the feeling, but we think, well, I don't know how that happened. Everything just seemed to magically, start to flow. Everything seems to sort of fit in. But this is an actual conscious way of getting into flow state.
You've coined a phrase called the Moan zone. What is the Moan zone?
Oh, I think we all know what the Moan zone is, don't we? We know, if you just complain constantly about things, it's exhausting. It's exhausting for you. It's exhausting for the people around you. We all know it, don't we? We all have a friend, don't we, that when they ring up to go, meet for a coffee, or we see them at an event, you think, oh no, please don't put me next to them.
Yeah.
Because you feel emotionally exhausted, being around them. Everything's always a problem. I heard a great quote, I think it could have been Einstein, which was, stay away from negative people. They always find a problem for your solution.
That's a good one.
So it's this thing of, look, the world has got challenges and opportunities, and it's got, outcomes. So if you want to think of your challenges as problems, again, language, and so there's a very good, it's actually a mathematical equation. So if you imagine your life as a blank sheet of paper, nothing's happened yet. When something happens and it creates a problem inside of you, it has a little boundary around it. It actually starts to take up space inside of your body and your mind somewhere. The problem with the problem is, if you keep focusing on the problem, it becomes more real. From a mathematical point of view, for this problem to exist, the opposite, as in the solution, must also exist simultaneously. It has to. So there is always a solution for every problem. Now, if we don't know exactly what the problem is, and we've just got generic solutions thrown at us, so if we go back to burnout for a moment, so generic solutions would be, oh, you need some self-care.
Ah, yes.
You need to go and have a bubble bath, or go and do some yoga, or take a holiday. It's like, that's a generic, that doesn't resolve the issue. That's not actually solving the problem.
Mm.
Or you just need to push through it. It's fine. It'll go eventually. Or you just need to, battle it alone, push through. It's absolutely fine. That's a generic bit of advice. Or even things like, you need to delegate more. It's like, really? So how do I delegate more when I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I'm a bit of a control freak, and I can't let go, and I'm worried that it's not going to be done properly? That's, the generic advice is not addressing the actual problem. So we have to find what that is first. Once we actually identify it, then we go, okay, that's the exact problem. Okay, now what's the solution? And we have to come out of it. So NLP is all about different perspectives and looking at the problem from a different angle. And it's incredible. I mean, it's the same as, if you're listening to someone moaning, it's very easy to go, oh, I know how to solve these problems. This is what I would do. This is what you should do. And then you give it the liberal advice and, you're liberally kind of, showering that person with your advice. And then you get really annoyed when they don't take it. The reality is because we haven't really understood what the problem is. But also, when we're in the moan zone, look, misery likes company. I think is a great saying. So we're trying to bring people into that energy as well, then we don't feel so bad. And also, if we're moaning and complaining, we're not taking responsibility for our role and our part in our lives. Even if we're blaming ourselves, it's not very helpful. But most of the time we will, so it's called, in NLP, it's called the empowerment equation is cause and effect. So you can either live at effect, which is where we're blaming ourselves or other people, and we're talking about the past. We're talking about, even if the past was 5 minutes ago, it's still the past. We're stuck in the effect, the impact of what's happened. If we move to cause, we accept a premise that we are where we are because of all of the decisions that we've made in our lives up to that point. And we are the only ones making those decisions. However, over 90% of those decisions will be unconscious. We're not even aware that we're making that decision.
Yeah.
I like to take it a step further, which is unusual from an NLP point of view. I like to take it to intention. And a really interesting way to establish your intention is to look at a situation that's happened, look at the impact, whether it's an argument with a colleague, whether it's a falling out with a client, whether it's, your partner, your children, it doesn't matter. And you look at the impact of your role, what you did, what you said, how you were, your expressions, your tone of voice, etc. And you ask the question, was that impact what I intended? Was my intention for that person to be upset? Of course not. That was not your intention. So then you go, well, what was my intention? What was my intention in that interaction? Once we can identify, and we might have to work around it a little bit to find what the real intention is, then we can recognize that we have to make better choices and decisions. So we take a step all the way back into intention and we go, well, my intention was for that person to understand how upset I was. My intention was not for them to end up walking off in a huff and us not speaking, for days, because that's not very useful for anyone. That's a lose-lose. So how could I have expressed that differently? How could I have said it differently? What could I have done? What better choices and decisions can I make in my life? And when we're just doing things unconsciously, it's very hard to do that. So we do need to stop and just look at, again, even with burnout, we look at the impact in our lives. I'm feeling disillusioned. I'm feeling cynical. I'm exhausted. I have irritability with everyone. Is that the intention of why you're doing what you're doing? Can't possibly be.
No. So what's that, I guess? It's the result, isn't it? But you don't know what necessarily the cause is. So I think what you're saying is you need to identify that cause.
Yeah, you need to take a step back and go, okay, look, I'm making some decisions here. I recognize most of them are unconscious. So how can I bring that into... And that's where coaching and someone to bounce off really works. It's quite hard sometimes to do this yourself, but it can be done. But it's really helpful to go, look, this is the impact that's going on in my life. I don't want this. This is not what I intend. There's something else I'm intending. I'm not quite sure how to get that.
Yeah, I think I'm just thinking that, so I'm occasionally guilty of a moan, probably.
Oh, we all are. It's okay. It's good to have a good moan.
And I think probably one reason people do it, yeah, exactly. I think one reason people do it is maybe to just try and get someone to understand where they're coming from. So maybe I'm like, I've got a problem I can't solve, and I don't know what to do, and so you're almost unconsciously saying to someone, I need help.
Yeah,
and
it's a communication, 100%.
But moaning about it's probably not the right way to do it. I guess you need to be a bit more direct, or find people who are going to be able to help you and listen to you and express that, the issue well.
So when people kind of go, do you have any friends? Because if do you just and I go, no, okay, look, I do have friends. And I always say, when I'm with my friends and they're going into the moan zone, I always offer them a choice. I go, do you want my friend hat? And if you want my friend hat, I'll go, oh yeah, that's terrible. Oh, that's awful. Yep, I get it. and not say anything. And sometimes people just want to vent without anything else. And I go, if you want to just vent and get it off your chest, fine. And sometimes by venting and talking about it, you find the solution yourself anyway. Or I'll say, okay, do you want my NLP hat on? And if you want my NLP hat on, I will challenge you. I will ask you questions that take you out of the moan zone, which is also the comfort zone, and get you to look at things differently so you can move past this. Because if we just keep repeating the same thing over again and expecting a different result, as we all know, that's the definition of insanity.
Yeah, I was just thinking now, I'm thinking about the moan zone in the context of probably of relationships, of marriage, of personal lives, but also
that's a whole other podcast, Chris.
but also in the context of professionals. So I guess as let's take the personal one first, I guess.
Okay.
And I believe I think it was you actually said it to me, is that sometimes people just want to be heard. Sometimes your partner might say something to you just because they don't necessarily want their problem to be solved by you. They just want to be acknowledged and heard. You gave some good advice. So just help me to recall that advice, because I think it will help people professionally and personally.
Yeah, I love this. Came from a book called Between Parent and Child. As far as I'm concerned, it's between people and people.
Yeah.
I don't think it was just about children. I think it was about all relationships. And it was a guy called Haim Ginott who wrote it. And his advice was, when children are upset or angry or in a particular emotional state, instead of trying to stop them feeling what they're feeling, you acknowledge what they're feeling first. And then you do nothing initially. You just go, I can see you're angry. I can see you're upset. Don't tell them, stop being angry, stop being upset. Because it makes us uncomfortable as parents when we see our children in distress. So actually the intention is that we don't want to feel distressed. That's actually the main reason why we try to get them to stop.
Yeah.
I can't cope with this. So by just acknowledging it, and I was thinking, yeah, that's the same though with your partner. If your partner comes home and had a bad day and they say, oh, that is such an awful day, what you don't want to do is go into who's having the worst life competition.
Yeah. Which is very easy to do.
Very well. You think you've had a hard day? Wait till you hear what happened to me today. No one is being heard, and the connection is being broken. So I have a favorite reframe, which is not people are attention seeking, but they are connection seeking. And that's absolutely the same for kids as well. When I hate the expression attention seeking. Because oh, this kid's bad because they're looking for attention. It's like, well, why are they looking for attention? What's the intention of the attention? The intention to connect is to be seen, it's to be heard. And we all feel like that. We're all kids inside, basically. So absolutely, I think that moan zone is to communicate, look, I'm struggling here, there's something going on, I just want to be acknowledged that I'm going through something. But you don't want to, my first trainer used to call it the swamp. And we've all got our swamp.
Stuck in the swamp.
You don't want to jump into someone else's swamp, and you don't want to bring anyone else into yours. So it's about, and again, being present and being very grounded. If someone is in that zone, if you're in your own head and you're all over the place and you're stressed and irritable, it's very hard then to kind of listen and be present. Whereas if you just think for a moment, okay, what's my intention with this person? My intention to have a great relationship, be connected, etc. Just stop, breathe, and just say, I see you. I see you're upset. I see you're angry. I see this is frustrating. Say nothing else. That's it. There's no solving. Very tempted to solve other people's problems, aren't we?
Absolutely.
Because it makes us feel better. We're like, oh, look, I've got great advice. But the reality is we don't really know what the problem is, and someone could be complaining about something, but that's not actually the problem.
Yeah, so I think that's obviously true in relationships. And when I say relationships, it's obviously husband and wife or whoever your partner is, but also with your children, your parents,
and with your
siblings,
colleagues,
whoever it may be. But yeah, that's what I was going to say. Definitely the corporate sphere, it could be a colleague saying something to you that you think they're moaning, but they're actually giving you a subtle message, which not all of us are good at picking up on.
No, because we're all busy.
Especially if you're in your own stuff.
It takes a bit of thought and a bit of kind of awareness to do this, but the result is amazing.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. So yeah, and I mean, people say to me, "How do you do what you do all day? Listening to people moaning." And I said, I don't really listening to people. I'm not listening to them moaning. What I'm listening for is what's my question going to be to help them understand themselves better? And then how do I flip it so they find the solution themselves? So what I see every day is people solving their problems and the impact it has, which is amazing.
So how do you do that? Give us some practical tools or something to do that.
Okay, so one of my favorite things is called chunking up or chunking down in NLP. So it comes to what's called the hierarchy of ideas. So if you imagine a ladder, the top of the ladder is something very abstract and very big. It has a lot of information. And at the bottom of the ladder is detail, very small detail. When most people are moaning, they're talking about detail, actually. In fact, they're not right at the detail. They're kind of in the middle.
Okay.
Yep. So a really great way to kind of go past the boundary of the problem that's in our nervous system somewhere, is to take that problem and then ask the question, okay, when so-and-so did this XYZ, how was that a problem for me? Okay, and then so that's and how's that a problem for me? And what you're doing is you're reducing the ambiguity until the problem becomes very tiny. You're now getting rid of all the other stuff until you find out exactly what the problem is. And then two things can happen. The problem can disappear. You can ask the final question, well, how is that a problem for me? And then you go, actually, that's not a problem for me.
Yeah.
Poof, and it just kind of disappears. And I've seen this happen many, many, many times. Or we now know what the exact problem is, and we start working on that, and we start reframing, and we start doing other things. Or you can go up, and this is really where intention comes in. So you go, okay, so this is normally it's about your own behavior. You say, so if I'm getting stressed, okay, so what is the purpose of stress for me? What is the intention of being stressed? So say, for example, it's like, well, I want to get someone's attention. I want them to know that I'm in pain. Okay, so then the other person knows that you're in pain. Okay, what does that then do for you? What is the intention of that? And you keep doing what's called chunking up until you get to a point where you realize that actually all this was about was something very high level. So a real intention is always very positive and high level, like love, joy, living my purpose. And it's so far removed from the original problem that when you get to this level and you're looking down at the original problem, you realize that the decision and choices that you were making were never going to achieve this. So it's from a higher level that you can then see the different ways of behaving and new choices that you can make.
So chunking, okay, chunking up and chunking down.
So that takes a bit of skill, takes a bit of training to kind of know which way to go. But definitely when someone's moaning, and if you to go, okay, so how is that a problem for you? Now you have to have rapport, otherwise someone might punch you in the face. So if you ask that, they go, what do you mean? What do you mean? How's it? It's obvious. It's like, no, it's not obvious. How something is a problem for one person, even for them, actually, often these questions, what they do is they reveal that they don't even understand it themselves, how it's a problem.
Yeah.
And these techniques, by the way, are brilliant for negotiation.
Really? Okay.
Because if you think about it, if you've got two parties who are negotiating, they're both stuck in their set of detail. They both think they're right, and they're trying to convince the other party that they're wrong. Now, if you can identify exactly what specifically is the problem, or you go up, if you chunk up, you will always, without fail, find a point of agreement.
Does that take both sides to chunk up, though?
Generally speaking, it's good to be able to chunk up both sides, but even if you've got the most problematic side and you chunk them up, they'll probably meet the less problematic side anyway, if that makes sense.
Unless they're really, really stubborn, I guess, or stuck in their own problems so much.
You can reframe. There's ways of explaining things to people so you're not manipulating them, which is one of the common misconceptions about NLP. People say, well, NLP, it's very manipulative and you're brainwashing people. And I go, actually, we're being brainwashed by everything all the time. You look at the news, you listen to a song, you watch a film. I mean, it's all hidden messages. It's all trying to convince, everyone's selling their idea, everyone's selling their point of view. The reality is, if you know NLP, you can actually, first of all, inoculate yourself against that a bit more. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be so influenced by other people and what you're watching. And secondly, if you want to be a good community, if you've got integrity and you come from a place of integrity, then it's so powerful in terms of helping people empower themselves. Bear in mind, I work a lot of teenagers. Now, no teenager has ever rung me and said, Sarah, I'd like to book an appointment. It's always the parent
Yeah.
who rings and goes, I have a teenager who's driving me nuts. Can you help? And I just go, yes. And when I work, so if it's younger children, I like to work with the families together. But if it's teens, I'm like, you know what, they need a bit of time on their own. And what I do is, and often the first session is me just explaining to them how what I do works. I'm not talking about me, I'm not talking about them, I'm not talking about the problem. I'm talking about our minds, how we filter information, how beliefs shape us, how emotional baggage will change our behaviour, and how all of this is within their power to change if they let me show them the techniques. So very few people have, I think in 24 years, I've probably had 2 clients that they didn't get out of thousands of people. And they stuck in my head because I was like, what could I have done differently?
Yeah.
But on the whole, most people will get a massive light bulb moment. It'll just be this revelation to them. And the problem literally just disappears because it's built on a false premise, essentially, that they've believed to be true. And once they recognize that it's false, the whole thing collapses.
So in a corporate environment, so a team member's in the moan zone and they come to you with just moan and moan and moan, maybe about another team member.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, that's not very helpful, is it really?
No, well, I guess there is obviously there's a reason why they've done that. And it is the best thing to acknowledge and just say, I see you feeling upset.
Yeah.
And let them talk.
Let them talk. And then, my question is always, how would you like to be feeling instead? When this person's doing this, what would you, always bring it back to yourself, because we are not in control of the people around us.
That's true.
And one of the things that we tend to do is we expend a lot of energy trying to change the world and the people in it before we do anything internally. And that might last for a short time, but it's not sustainable. The minute you change a limiting belief, the minute you let go of emotional baggage, something magical happens, which is the world seems to change around you.
Interesting. Case, you've said to me before that our emotional states are more often of a choice than we think. So how do you explain that without being unrealistic?
So our thoughts drive our feelings, drive our actions, drive our results. So if we look at our thoughts, if it's a negative thought, it's going to have a negative feeling. And we are actually choosing that unconsciously, but we are deciding to look at something negatively. I'm not saying take a really horrific situation and go, oh, it's absolutely fine.
Simplify, yeah.
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying, where is your focus? Whatever you... So I love quotes. I'm a bit of a magpie. I like to steal quotes and expressions. And I have one which I love, which is, whatever you focus on expands.
True. Yes.
Isn't it?
Yep, absolutely.
Completely true. If you keep focusing on this person's negative behavior, then in your world, in your mind, well, first of all, they're taking up space rent-free.
Yes, yes. And that's all you see, isn't it? That's all you see is that negative thing.
There's no Ijari. They're just in there.
Yep.
Secondly, that's going to make you feel exhausted and negative, and your behavior is going to be governed by how you're feeling. So it becomes this thing of, well, where is the starting point? And we have to go back and look at what are we focusing on? What are we choosing to look at? And then look at, okay, well, what's the intention? By focusing on that, what am I hoping to achieve? What does it do for me? So we can't stop what we're focusing on in the moment, but if we find ourselves in a negative space, recognize that there's no such thing as an unresourceful person, but there are unresourceful states. So a negative state, it's not that it's completely unresourceful. There are times when anger is appropriate, for example. If someone's crossing a boundary, someone's hurting you, your family member, anger's very galvanizing, but you don't want to be angry 20 years later.
No.
Not very useful.
You've got to let it go.
You've got to let it go at some point, otherwise it's just going to eat away. Sadness, totally appropriate human reaction if we lose a pet or a person, or even a dream. We can have an idea of something and things happen out of our control and we've lost that idea, it's gone. We can grieve that. We can grieve the end of a relationship. So, yeah, absolutely. You don't want to be still sad 20 years later. Fear, absolutely appropriate if we're in danger. You don't want to be feeling fear when you're not in danger. Not very useful. And guilt and hurt, they're the same thing. So we have these big emotions It's not the emotion, it's the fact that we've chosen to carry it because we think that's what we need to protect ourselves.
Very. There's so much food for thought. So much food
Is your
for
brain
thought.
full? Are you?
Yeah, well, my brain is very full. It's usually very full. But it brings
We want to nourish it, though. We want to have a good.
Well,
a good
exactly.
food.
And I was just thinking back to something you said to me the other day about a monkey. Not my monkey, not my circus.
Oh yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's one of my favourite expressions.
Yeah, explain that one. I believe it's to do with you can only worry about your own stuff, basically. I mean, you can only control yourself. You can only control how you feel. You can influence other people, but you could. Only control yourself.
It's very common, isn't it, though, that when we see something happening, it could be a family situation, it can be work, it can be friends, it can be whatever, but it's not really directly related to you. We can jump in, and we get involved, and it's nothing to do with us. So one of my favourite expressions is when something is really nothing to do with me, I just go, look, it's not my monkey, it's not my circus. It's like, I can't control that monkey.
Yes.
Whatever's going on, that's not I've got my own monkey going on, internal chatter. That's what we want to focus on. So, yeah, I think people don't realize they have a choice.
Yeah.
Because we're sort of taught that to be happy, we have to have the right external environment. We have to have the right body. We have to have the right job. We have to, the world has to be all is well in the world and then we're happy. But how many people do you know who seem to have everything and are miserable?
Yeah, absolutely.
They're in the moan zone because,
Yes.
Whereas you can see people around the world who have nothing. They live on less than $1 a day, and yet they are happy. They're smart. I mean, we don't know that fully, do we? But I mean, it's not about what's going on around us. It's about our own internal world and what's happening inside of us. And we are in control of that. We just don't know it until we're shown the tools. Yeah,
it's quite interesting because a lot of, I think, in life as you're growing up, you're taught not to be selfish. You're taught to think about how other people feel. You're taught to, get outside of yourself. But it almost feels like what we're talking about today is actually, saying, no, I need to think about myself. I need to, obviously in proportion, but you need to think about what is my perspective on this situation? What am I bringing and what am I imposing on this other person? Let's think about myself.
I mean, look, we've all been on planes because we live in Dubai, so I don't know anyone who hasn't flown on a plane unless they're born here. But if what happens in the safety, check at the beginning? What do they say about the oxygen mask?
Yeah.
You put it on first.
Absolutely.
And it's hilarious because I'm looking around the plane at all the mums who are like, oh, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But the reality is there's a reason why they say that. And they say that because if you're okay, you are in a better position to help other people. So it's not about being selfish. It's about being in a position where as long as you are actually okay, the ripple effect will be positive. You are in a better position to help your kids, to help your spouse, to help your friends, and that has a ripple effect. We're all connected energetically. This is an energetic universe. Thoughts are energy, feelings are energy, actions are energy, everything's energy. It's how do we come back to kind of the deepest point that we can go to change this and then look at the ripple effect. Trying to do it the other way is very difficult. There's a lot of parents who will sacrifice themselves for their children and then be resentful.
Yeah, because the children aren't grateful.
No, it's not their job. It's not their job to be grateful. They go, I didn't ask to be born. I've got an adult and a teenager, 2 sons. So,
yes.
And they do come back, by the way, from planet teenage. They do come back. Just to reassure people out there. But yeah, the idea that we have to that we'll be happy if everyone else is happy. I'm happy as long as my children are happy. I'm happy. It's like, how can they be happy if you're miserable? How can they be happy if you're stressed? How can they be calm if you're stressed?
So they pick up on it.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I think I said it to you recently, and I don't know where it came from, but your energy field is huge. All of our energy fields are massive, and our energy enters the room before we do. And if you think about that, then you're thinking, okay, so what is my energy telling people before I've even arrived? And that you can't have them have a different reaction to your energy. You have to change your energy.
Yeah.
And that's much simpler. It's much easier to do than trying to change other people's minds or how they're feeling.
Very true. And that's probably what good, influential people do, is just, but it's hard to fake it. For some people, it's hard to fake it.
You're not faking it.
You have to genuinely have to feel it.
You cannot fake it. You cannot fake it. They've done experiments and they've shown that, clients can pick up on how the therapist is feeling about them, even if they say nothing. That they know if they're being judged, that they know that they're being condemned, that they know that they're being listened to or not listened to. So it's not about faking it. You don't want to fake it. You want to go in and you why not be calm? Why not be grounded? Why not be happy? And happiness is not a permanent state. It's emotions are waves. They rise and they fall. If you were happy all the time, the men in the white coats would come and cart you off. But it's about, how do you bounce back? What's your bounce back ability? I always call it your resilience. How do you model to your children that you don't need to be stressed to solve a problem? You can look at it differently. You can have a different perspective, because they will learn from you before anyone else, and their adult life will be determined by what happens to them as children.
Just to finish off our conversation and take it back, I guess, to professional services. A lot of people in professional services are just overwhelmed. Overwhelmed with the amount of things they've got to do, the clients they have to deal with, or the employees, or their colleagues, whatever it may be, or just the amount of work they've got to deliver in a day. I know that you work on a number of techniques for overwhelm, but one of it is read fast. Tell us a little bit about read fast and how it helps people.
So this is not just NLP. These are other things that over 24 years, I've amassed a huge amount of tools, and I like to kind of use them for specific things. So read fast. So fast stands for being in flow, becoming an active reader, strategies for choosing the right material, note-taking, memory, etc. And then T is, how do you transform your knowledge from what you're reading? So you don't want to be reading things you already know. How do you find new information that really kind of expands your mind, etc.? I did this in 2011. Someone taught me these techniques, and it was remarkable. So I'll just give a kind of a brief thing. So flow, obviously, we've already talked about flow state. So that's really important. And when it comes to active reading, one of the things that I really believed was I had to read every word in whatever I was reading. Otherwise, I hadn't read it. I was always terrified I'd missed, because that's taught at primary school. Start at the beginning, read every word, finish at the end, now you've read the book. What was in it? I don't know. You could have read the whole book and you've no idea what's in it. Yeah, so it doesn't mean you've actually, know it. But the idea is you read every word, you remember everything, you're tested, boom, I've got the knowledge. So I was still operating from that, even though I was in my 40s. And so I just embarked on my master's degree. I did my first module, sort of the old way, the traditional way of reading, and kept thinking, I don't know how I'm going to cope with this 2 years of study, because I've got 2 young kids, a busy practice, I'm a trainer, my husband's away all the time, I'm doing everything myself. And when I did this 2-day course, it just blew my mind. So one of the little things there's a lot in it, can't do all today, but one of my favorite things is the 80-20 rule, which is that 80% of meaning comes from 20% of the words. Not every word carries the same weight, is the same importance. So when I teach people how to find then those keywords, so there are techniques and strategies for doing it, and you set a purpose, or back to intention again, what is your purpose for reading this? And if you set your purpose, I call it the flow switch. Because if you know why you're reading something, suddenly the information will emerge, because your brain is kind of programmed to look for what you're asking for. If you don't know why you're reading something, you're just thinking, well, I just have to know it all. It finds that very hard. It's not structured enough. It's not, it's not setting a route through it. So again, I've worked with children, teens who are doing exams, university students, and then professionals who are doing maybe professional exams, or just simply when we all have a huge amount to read. It can be reports, it can be research, it can be emails. You can even do this with emails. You're just finding the key information so that you can get through the work quicker. And it is remarkable. People often, they come out and they're like, why aren't we taught this in school? I'm like, I don't know.
Well, it turns out my daughter is being taught it at school, because when I told her about it, she's like, yeah, I already know this.
Yeah, but she's
Okay.
got a super brain, so
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Not everyone can do it. Not everyone can do it. And in primary school, you want to be reading everything because it teaches you vocabulary and sentence structure and grammar, and there's other things involved. But once you've got those skills, you don't need to read everything. And that was my being let off the hook. And I just like, wow, I don't have to read everything to find the information. That's what words are for. It's information.
So I know you're running a course very soon. How can people join that course? It's both online and physical, right?
It's on. This one's online, so it's live online. So I have people from all over the world coming to do it. So the next one I think starts on the 17th of Feb. So it's 3 sessions. They're each 3 hours. I know it sounds like a lot, 3 hours online. Promise you, it's people go, wow, that flew by, because it's very interactive and they're actually putting into practice, and they're really thinking about their own. Not just listening to me, that would be dreadfully boring. So you can go to my website, which is sarahhaboubi.com, and just look under workshops and you'll see Read Fast. There's lots of workshops, but I think it's the one at the top. So they just can sign up for that and come and do it. And yeah, I love it. I always love the light bulb. Again, I always talk about light bulb moments, but that realization that we are limiting ourselves and we don't have to do that. So
for others who are listening today or watching today who have resonated, I guess, with some of the things you said and some of the issues that have risen, the best way to get some help or to get some advice, I guess, is to visit sarahhaboubi.com. Find your contact details on there. I know you're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. You do give very helpful free advice through Instagram. I think even TikTok, maybe. I think I've
I'm not on TikTok, but
not on TikTok. Okay.
LinkedIn. I've got a lot of videos on LinkedIn at the moment, so they will be transferred over to Instagram and Facebook at some stage. But no, so I'd say the website and LinkedIn is probably the best way.
And soon we'll be able to Google the Brain Lady and that'll come up.
I'm not sure if I'll come up as the Brain Lady yet. It was kind of a new description, but definitely my name, and you'll find me.
Oh, I'm sure I can help you with that. Let's see if we can work it out after this. Sarah Haboubi, thank you so much for joining us today, for all your examples and insights and inspiration.
Thanks, Chris. It's been an absolute joy to be here.
For those of us, or those who are listening here or watching us, if you recognise yourself as being in the moan zone, or you can feel burnout creeping in, just take one tool from today and use it this week. If you need more help, then you can reach out to Sarah. But one thing I've learned is that it doesn't take a lot. Just small changes in your state of mind can create big changes in the outcomes and the way you deal with people, whether it's your family, your friends, or your colleagues. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with your network. For more insights and support, visit muhami.ae or connect with me at CJA Consulting. I'm Chris Adams. Until next time, stay informed, stay empowered. Thank you for joining us on Muhami Matters. If you found today's episode valuable, subscribe and connect with me to stay updated. Join me again soon as we continue to bring you credible insights, practical strategies, and trusted advice to empower your professional journey. I'm Chris Adams. Until next time, stay informed and stay empowered.